Altcoin buyers and their altcoins usually end up going to zero because they fail to understand how to analyze altcoin season. They also struggle to figure out where we are in the crypto cycle. In this video, I'll show you how to easily and simply analyze altcoin season so that this time around you can walk away with real profits and not just paper money. And definitely not cool screenshots of what your portfolio used to look like. The state of altcoins and altcoin season is in a very interesting place. So these charts are going to encapsulate altcoin season before we get into the raw data. Now I'm on a site called Magic Money. Okay, now Magic Money has a list of the top 1,000 tokens, as you can see up here on the top, versus Bitcoin and the overall performance over the last year. And it actually breaks it down into different segments, as you can see right here. So it goes back over a year. Now at the year mark, you can see the red is the underperformance of altcoins compared to Bitcoin, similar to how we look at the Bitcoin chart, right? When we're talking about Bitcoin dominance, but without actually having to understand how to look at the chart. So it's very simplified on here for you. So they show you that over the last year probably would have done you some good to be holding Bitcoin. Obviously, there are a few altcoins out there that outperform Bitcoin, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that overall, the altcoin market as a whole has lagged and has been underperforming compared to Bitcoin. Now, if you take a look at 30 days, we can see that the green has went up just a little bit and the red has come down, meaning that we're getting closer to the point where now altcoins might be able to outperform Bitcoin, right? And if you go down to 7-day marker, it hasn't really changed that much. I know there's been a lot more fear that's come back into the market since Bitcoin has dropped sub 110. And over the past day, we're over at 783. So that's telling me that altcoins are starting to flip, obviously because Bitcoin has had a pretty drastic fall off compared to what we've been used to throughout this cycle. In prior cycles, we've seen Bitcoin drop 20, 30, 40% multiple times, like 7, 8, 10 times throughout the entirety of the 4-year cycle, which also is breaking, which I talked about in a few videos ago. But the point I'm trying to make is that this time around, we haven't really seen those drastic 40% drops, right? Often as we have in previous cycles. So this is also another reason why the altcoin market is lagging in terms of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin dominance has been so high. There's been so much institutional adoption when it comes to Bitcoin. So that's why we're seeing Bitcoin's price higher. And if you hear my voice, it sounds a bit different. I'm under the weather right now. So I'm still recording this video to you guys because I want to get it out to you because a lot happened this week. Anyways, we are going to talk about M2 global money supply in a second because I also want to show you why Bitcoin's been outperforming altcoins. And this is going to help us figure out when altcoin season probably should be and when we can look to have an altcoin season. So if we look at this chart here, this pretty much shows us the activity in the retail space as far as buying Bitcoin and investing in crypto assets. So you can see the legend where you have the gray part is the neutral, and then you have the I am color deficient if you didn't know. So I'm just going to call this green, I guess. I don't know, green. And this one over here is, I'm going to call it pink because I can't actually see the color. And this one I'm going to call red, all right? Which I think I did kind of get spot on. Anyways, you can correct me in the comments all you want. But the point of this chart is to show the growth of how much retail has been in the market at different points of the cycle. So most of this market cycle, as you can see here, and we can kind of detail this out from 2022 when we fell off a cliff, it's been pretty much a lot of neutrality. So meaning not many people have been from the retail space. A lot more institutional buying has been happening, as you can see here from the gray parts. Now, when I hover over the chart, I want to point something out. In spring of 2024, when we had that massive run up, you can see a lot of retail invested. And we had a lot of people FOMO in, and we saw a drawback on Bitcoin's price not too far after. The good part about this is, as you can see here on the bottom part of the chart, you can see that there was actually a lot of retail buying up at the bottom of the market, which is a good thing. To those of you that were there buying, congratulations to you if you're still holding, because it hasn't been an easy cycle at all. In my opinion, we should have already seen a lot higher prices for altcoins. But the altcoin scene has kind of been dragged out because of the liquidity cycle, and we're going to get into that in a moment. Okay, from the Kobayashi letter, and if you don't follow this guy, I highly advise you do. A lot of useful data and information, but breaking news, the US M2 money supply surged another 4.8% year over year in August 2025 to a record 22.2 trillion. This marks the fastest pace since July of 2022, in line with a 4.8% year-over-year increase in the prior month. U.S. money supply has grown for 18 consecutive months. So this is the global, the amount of money that is floating around the globe is expanding, right? So it's probably going to cause a lot of inflation. As you know, if you watch my videos, asset prices go a lot higher when inflation ramps up as well, because all of these assets are priced in dollars. The people that are only holding dollars only lose value over time because all of their spending power is being diluted by all the excess money that's coming to the system, as you can see here, right? 18 months of consecutive growth from the M2 money supply. Dollars being printed into circulation. So if we hold these assets, there's a reason why Bitcoin and stocks and real estate have been going up over the past couple of years. More so Bitcoin and stocks and gold and things like that. It's because they're assets, right? Anyways, furthermore, inflation-adjusted M2 rose 1.8 year over year, posting the 12th straight monthly increase we just talked about. The U.S. dollar's bear market continues, which is a good thing. Like I tell you guys, it's like a lever, right? When you see the dollar devalue, that only means that asset prices go up. And we're actually going to get into the DXY chart as well. So a lot to get into today. So subscribe to the channel and leave a like if this video has been useful so far. We're just the tip of the iceberg of how we are going to be analyzing altcoin season and how we're going to be analyzing the markets in general going forward, right? Over the next 10, 15, 20 years. I'm going to give you all the tools that you need to do this for yourself if you want, or you can just come back here. So subscribe to the channel so you can come back and get these videos as I update them all the time. So as you can see here on the chart, since jab season, you can see that the liquidity spiked up, and this is obviously to counteract a lot of the job loss and things like that at that time. So you can see why there's been such a massive spike on the chart as far as global M2. So there is an article from Cointelegraph. Bitcoin's price target sits around 170K as global M2 supply reaches record high. So if you don't know, global M2 leads Bitcoin. When we see M2 go spike, you usually see Bitcoin follow. The two charts, which is the global M2 money supply and the Bitcoin price, are correlated 96%, which is insane. The fact that these charts are correlated that closely just goes to show why you see a spike in Bitcoin's price shortly after you see a spike in the M2 money supply. So the money supply moves first and then Bitcoin usually follows after. And that is actually detailed out on this chart as well. So you're usually going to see a pretty close correlation between Bitcoin's price and the M2 money supply. Remember, like I said, it has a 96% correlation in price, which is insane. So they actually expect that Bitcoin could target at 170. And I don't know what the time frame is. I'd probably like to see a time frame on that, but we thought Bitcoin was going to 170 at some point throughout this market. And me personally, if you've been listening to the channel for a while, you know that I think a top is coming within the next 6 to 12 months. It's probably going to be closer to the 6 to 8 month mark, but as the data comes out, we'll have to adjust our numbers. And as the data comes out, I'll be also sharing it with you. Now, this chart over here actually better details out what's going on with the global M2. You can see global M2 has already reached that 170 mark they were talking about. Actually, it looks like 180K mark, and we're just hovering around 106 now. Now, this Bitcoin price is actually dated back from in July. So, but as you can see, if you just went and checked the price, we're still sub 110K. So we still have a lot of catching up to do. And if the global money supply continues to go on an upwards trend, then I'm going to continue to be as bullish as I possibly can. And this is how you analyze the markets, right? This is just one of many tools that I use. I've already shown you a couple tools I used before, 2 other tools. This is the third one. I have a lot more tools to show you of how to analyze for the altcoin season and how to follow these markets to make sure you are making the most possible money, because that's one thing that I am here to do. I'm here to try and make you some money. Okay, because who doesn't like to make money? Now, as we predicted and we talked about on this channel, we actually got that rate cut. And the only reason we knew we got that rate cut in September is because we used the Fed Watch tool, right? You can see it up here. This is from the CME group. Now, this is a chart that tracks the probability of potential rate cuts coming up in the future, right? You can see we have one coming up October 29, 2025, and you can see that we're actually supposed to be getting a potential 50% rate cut, which is crazy, right? We're already at 4.25, but we could potentially see it go down all the way to 3.75, which would be amazing. Now, in December, we still have that same or similar rate cut, I should say, down to 3.5. So we're expected to drop another 0.75 basis points between now and the end of the year, which I do expect to happen. As you can see on the chart, we're actually predicting it as well. And they talked about having rate cuts going into next year as well, which is not yet to be seen. So we're going to have to obviously just wait for these things to play out. So we're going to have to wait for 29th of October, 10th of December, and the 28th of January to see how many rate cuts we get into January. But because the Fed took so long to drop rates this time, and this is also why we have a long dated cycle that's going into its 5th year, right? We're usually in a 4-year cycle, but I definitely expect the cycle to go into 2026. And that is obviously the peak for Bitcoin and obviously the height of altcoin season. Now, if you know me, you know I love the ISM chart. This pretty much details out the business cycle. So if you don't know, after 2008 and the financial crisis in 2009, we've had a cyclical cycle every 4 years, 3 to 5 years, I would say. And this is actually how we got the 4-year cycle in Bitcoin, because every single 4 years, the US has to refinance its debt. And this is why you see a spike in assets at around the same time and a drop in assets around the same time as well. So the ISM details out that the business cycle, the liquidity cycle as well, also plays a part of it. But for those of you who've been on the channel, you kind of already know where I'm going with this, but I don't mind explaining it and doing it again because I think it's a very important chart to follow. If you want to be able to analyze when altcoin season is coming, you got to go back and figure out what happened in the years past. So if you go back to the chart where we had our last cycle peak, and I'm not counting the double top because we had the real peak in early of 2021, you can see here that's also detailed out on the ISM, which spiked around 64 in February, right? And we had a peak on the Bitcoin price, I believe it was late April of 2021, early May of 2021. And you can see that the ISM was already starting to peak back downward, which would have been a good indicator right in between here, between February 28th and March 31st would have been a great time to take your profits. And just to prove to you that I'm not full of it, I know what I'm talking about. When you go back onto the chart around the same time, as you can see here, so mid to late April, you saw a spike in the Bitcoin price, and you saw a spike in altcoins just a month after that. So you already had a good run up from altcoins, but you saw the peak of the altcoin market about 3 weeks to a month after that as well. So the ISM already detailed out the price in Bitcoin. Now, understand that the liquidity cycle, so the global M2, is actually 3 months leading to the ISM, 3 to 6 months leading to the ISM and the Bitcoin price. So you want to follow global liquidity first, because if global liquidity starts to slide off and go into a slight downtrend over a period of time, a good period of time, right, over the course of 6 to 12 months or so, then you probably want to come over to the ISM and just to see and check to see where we're at, right? Because you probably have a top in the charts. Now, it also details out the bottom of the market. Everybody knows what March 2020 entails, and you want to look at what the ISM was doing around that time. Would have told you it's a great buying opportunity as well. If you even go back over to 2017, right, and you go to the end of 2017, right around here, you also had a spike above 60 in the ISM. And if you go back to the actual Bitcoin chart around that time as well, let me just slide this bad boy over. You can see that we had a spike in Bitcoin and altcoins as well. So I like using the ISM in terms of when we cross the 50-point mark, that is the neutral point, and I like to start taking profits when we cross the 55 to 56 mark. I don't want to wait till we get to 60 because there's a chance that we don't get to 60. And if you go back on the all-time chart, you can see there's certain parts and certain cycles where we actually didn't get up to 60. We got close, but we didn't get up to 60. So I don't want to rely on us getting all the way up to 60 to then start to sell my bags. I want to take profits when we get above 55. And it's not to say I'm going to take everything. I might take, let's say, 40%, and then I might chop off another 20 as a couple weeks to months go by. All depends on what I see in the charts, but come around that time, I'll definitely be doing that for you. So I want you to be informed when that time comes. I don't want you to get caught. I don't want you to get caught holding the bag. That's all I'm trying to say. So subscribe to the channel. Subscribe. Now, if you were looking at all these charts and you're wondering to yourself, what is the business cycle? I shared this chart before with my community. And for the new people here, you're going to understand what this means in a second. So This is the business cycle. And remember what I said, right? The business cycle coincides with the ISM. So this is how you should be looking at the peaks and the valleys of the ISM. So we start off here in phase one, which is the expansion phase, right? And this is up here when you start to see, like it says right here, information, technology, financials, communications, consumer discretionary start to go up, right? And mind you, this is all based off of GDP, which you can see here is gross domestic product, right? And this is just pretty much like your country's net worth, for example, right? So then you have the peak out here, which is pretty much where we want to be. This is altcoin season right up here. This is when, like it says, financials, energy materials, crypto, stocks, everything is going crazy bananas, right? This is when we probably peak around the 55 to 60 point mark on the ISM, right? Then we go down here, we get the contraction phase, and this is when things start to go through a bit of a bear market. Things start to cool off, right? Liquidity starts to dip, things like that start to happen, right? Interest rates start to go back up again, right? Can't forget about that. The DXY, which I'm going to show in a second, which is the dollar index, starts to go back up again. So that's around this part here until we hit that bottom peak where everyone's exhausted and everyone's already sold out all of their bags. And this is usually where you should be buying a lot of the distress. This is when people are the most fearful down here, and this is when you should be buying boatloads, right? And then you obviously have the recovery phase, right, that leads into the expansion phase over here. So this is the business cycle in a whole. This is the simplest way to look at it. And all of these valleys and peaks that you see here are pretty much these valleys and these peaks that you see on the ISM, right? Now, I've mentioned something to you a million times over the past couple minutes. I'm talking about the DXY, the dollar index. So the dollar index pretty much details out the strength or the weakness of the US dollar. So the reason why we track the US dollar is because 50% of all global trade in dollars is done with USD, which is why we track the DXY and how the US dollar is doing, because we'll get a pretty good read on what's about to happen with markets as well, right? So you can see here the 100-point mark is actually the neutral point. So we've cracked below the 100-point mark, but we're facing a lot of support here from previous price action, okay? So until we can get down towards the 90-point level on a DXY is when we'll see an altcoin season. We usually see altcoin season around this point, as you can see here, right? Remember that spring 2021? The DXY was already showing you as well that we're in an altcoin season because the dollar is super weak, right? They're printing dollars, printing dollars, printing dollars, and a lot of this money is flowing into assets, particularly at this point, risk assets, right? The same thing is true back in 2018. You can see here as well. The DXY fell off a cliff, and when did it fall off a cliff? Late 2017, early 2018, and that's also where we got a peak in the Bitcoin price, and that's also when we've seen a spike in altcoins. So this is the main reason why you haven't seen altcoins across the board go up yet, or even go up parabolically, is because we haven't seen a dip in the DXY. We haven't seen a spike in the ISM either. We haven't also seen Bitcoin's price jump up and match global M2. And we also haven't been able to see enough interest rate cuts either. Okay, these are the things that help you analyze altcoin season. This is how to analyze altcoin season. This is what you should be doing. Now, we're not done yet, right? We are far from done. So this is the new pool, and this is the net profit and loss across multiple different cycles. As you can see on the left-hand side, the red is euphoria and greed. This is when we're peaking in Bitcoin's price, right? Belief is in the yellow, which is more so like denial, right before you get that euphoric phase. People don't believe it because they're so beaten down and scarred from the bear market. And then you have the optimism here, hope, and then you have capitulation, which is obviously the bottom of the market when everybody is selling and everybody is scared. Shh, I shouldn't say that, but you know what I have to say. Scared hitless, okay? And before I forget to mention, the yellow line is the nupul, okay? Now, depending on where the nupul is also plays a factor in where we are in the cycle, because as you can see here, let's go back to the last previous peak. You can see here on the nupul that we got close to that 70% mark. We got up to, oh, we did. We got up to 73%. So we got above 70, right? Which is the point that we're looking for. Now, if you go back to 2017, 2018, we also got up above. We got up to 77%, right? You go all the way back to 2014, we got up to 80, I think 81. Yes, 81%. So as you can see here on this chart, this is something that we use to analyze altcoin season, because you can also see that Bitcoin prices also peaks around this area. And when we see the new pool get close, because right now we're only sitting at 54%. We're not even close to the 70% or even crossing it yet. So if we did see it cross above the 70% mark, best believe the top would be close if it wasn't in already. And this is why we use the new pool chart. Now, all of these tools can detail out the top of the bull cycle, right, for Bitcoin and altcoins. But the purpose of me showing you all these different charts is because you can't rely on just one chart. One chart may flash that the top is in and the other may not. What you're looking for is correlation between all of the charts. When all of these signals are telling you the exact same thing, you can bet your bottom dollar that the top is, if it's not already in, it's close to being in, or it's in when you're looking at these charts. I just wanted to put that into perspective for you. So that you might be sitting there just asking me, I don't know. There might be some of you out there asking, like, why do I need to see all these charts? Can't I just use one or the other? No. You want to look for correlation between multiple different signals flashing, saying the exact same thing, to give you a better perspective and understanding on when you should be buying, like down here when we're in capitulation zones, or when you should be selling and taking profits, which is up here on the new pool, right? And to give you some perspective on what the price of Bitcoin should be looking like come the end of this cycle. Now, this isn't for 100%. I don't want anyone to take this chart for law, for Bible, or anything like that. Understand that it's just a chart and there's many charts like these, but to give you some perspective on where you could expect Bitcoin's price to potentially go this cycle, right? So just a quick detail of what you're looking at here, okay? You're looking at the stock to flow model, okay? So simply put, the stock to flow just shows the divergence between the amount of Bitcoin that's being mined and the Bitcoin price. Just keep it very simple. Now, this gray line up here is obviously the stock to flow and where we should be in terms of price on Bitcoin. So as of right now, it's saying that we should be up at 314K on the stock to flow, and Bitcoin's price is only sitting at 111. We know it's 110, right? We know what this price of Bitcoin is right now, 109,000, right? Looking at this chart saying we should be up at $316,000. And that's pretty much what the price looks like for the foreseeable future. So if you go all the way into even 2027, you can see 2026 here as well, that it's saying we should be up in the $300,000 range as far as Bitcoin. And the reason why this chart has been useful over the past couple cycles, not sure if it's going to be now, right? I have to make that very, very clear. But you can see Bitcoin's price has always stayed correlated to the stock to flow. We've always broken over these little flat points, as you can see here, right? With the Bitcoin price when we peaked in a particular cycle. And then we've came back down and traded obviously below a lot of the times with the previous cycle when we're in a bear market. So technically speaking, if you were to just look at the last previous cycles, even counting and diminishing returns, we should at least be seeing it at par, if not just slightly below that gray line, which would still put us up above that $300,000 range. So do I think we're going to be able to get there? I don't know. If I'm being completely honest with you, I don't think we're going to be able to get to $300,000 this cycle. I think it would take interest rates. I think we need at least 5 to 6 more interest rate cuts, number one. Number two, I think we would need to see the business cycle and the global M2 continue to go up. That's a whole nother thing, right? We talked about both those things this cycle. We obviously need to see the DXY fall flat on its face, down by 90, for me to be confident that we could potentially see these prices. Now, with all of the inflows coming in, I think it is possible. I'll say that, but I don't want to get anyone's hopes up and be too overly bullish, right? And at the same time, I don't like to be too overly bearish as well. Now, there's times that I am very sure about things, and I tell you that. Most of these charts, other than the stock to flow, I am very sure on because they've shown me the bottoms and tops of markets before, and I've relied on them and they've worked for me, right? So this is something that I think you should put into your mental framework when you're going out there and investing. I do love and appreciate you guys. I hope you got a lot of value from this video, and I'll see you in the next one.